Let's start to take action today. So let's do green mortgages. Let's change how we do some of our commercial lending. And let's know that will be a positive impact on our emissions.
One of the first things I really want to talk to you about is GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. One of the very many kind of alphabet soups that we have to deal with in the banking sector. I just want to know, first of all, what does it mean? What does being a member of that mean for you?
Yeah, so within there's lots of different parts, and as we look at it in terms of the banking piece, it's all about the Net Zero Banking Alliance.
Yeah.
So actually, how do we get all the banks down to net zero? And look, for me, it's around having an organisation that can help you interpret policy, then a place where you can work in the right manner with all of your peers, and actually set the gold standard of how do we do this race to zero.
Yeah.
So I think what there is great work going over across the river from where we are at the moment. They're trying to redefine a lot of the Paris alignment kind of work to get you the rule book.
Yeah.
But then actually, how do you really interpret it and then actually build it into what a bank does on a day-to-day basis, which is around lending and borrowing and looking after people's investments.
Exactly.
And it's very much seen as one of the gold standards to kind of help us deliver that work.
And the key thing, and probably the differentiating factor, if it's right, is to say that this is in the service of trying to get to 1.5, limit warming to 1.5, and net zero by 2050, and that's built into the whole thing, right? Yeah,
no, absolutely, and it's to try to get to a standard that we can measure ourselves against, take the interpretation of policy, but that is kind of measurable, it's robustly calculated, we all understand kind of where we're going,
right.
And then an environment that people can then work in to kind of move forward.
Right.
And I think what's really important with so much of what we talk about at COP26, and it's evident, but we're not all starting in the same position. And actually, but what you can do in the conversations that we'll all be having this week is by the end of these 2 weeks, in fact, our knowledge will be that much further.
Yeah.
There'll be better standards and we'll kind of pull together. So you're kind of, those that are ahead are helping you learn and those that are behind are kind of being pulled along.
Right. So that's the kind of virtuous circle that we hope.
That we hope, and sometimes there's nothing like a bit of banking competition to think, well, they've gone a bit further, we need to catch up.
Right.
And I think that being able just to see what people are doing and to have the debates in a kind of safe way with the right environment around about you is really important.
So Reclaim Finance, who are one of the lobby groups, who came out with a report today, and they're flagging some potential problems with GFANZ, such as in the net zero banking bit, they're saying you've got up to 3 years to go through this whole process of setting, getting to the point of knowing what your emissions are anyway, which is kind of where we are.
Yeah, exactly.
But obviously what they're talking about is some of the bigger American banks who've kind of joined slightly towards the end of the process, and the concern they're flagging is, right, look, we've got 8 or 9 years to kind of halve emissions in the world. And these guys, the JP Morgans and Goldman Sachs, they've got 2-3 years to kind of get to a point where they've said what their emissions are, and they said how they're going to get them down, and that's like getting you into the middle of the decade, right? So just how do you think about that? Is that a problem? So
I don't think it is a problem as long as people are taking actions today, rather than waiting to say, this stuff for me is not sequential. Let's start to take action today. So let's do green mortgages. Let's change how we do some of our commercial lending. Let's lend to people with credible transition plans.
Yeah.
And let's know that will be a positive impact on our emissions.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we're working on the emissions now, and it takes 3 years because it's really hard. There's some really complicated maths involved,
right.
And you're doing data, or you're trying to get data that you just don't have.
Isn't the basic problem you've got, you can, with the best of intentions, want to know what your emissions are, but when you get into scope 3 emissions, which is the emissions of your clients, you've got to rely on them having good disclosure.
To an extent, so retail you can do quite well, and if you think of our blending, retail is a significant portion of our lending book, so it's about half of it, sort of thing. Then you go into your client space, and I think that is a real challenge. So if I'm particularly in that small or mid-cap business, how do I measure my emissions? You don't have the benefit that I have of a finance department who's sitting there working away their emissions, which is what we've now created.
Yeah.
So actually, how do we work with them? And we're doing some interesting partnerships with the likes of Microsoft to try to develop that. And then you've got the bigger guys. But I think what you do know is if you're somebody who's working in some of the dirtier or the different kind of industries that we know generate more carbon, you can also go, right, go really simple as you start. Go red, amber, green. You go, that one must be red, so how do I get it better? How do I work with them? And so I think the really important thing is the measurement has to happen. We're seeking to get a global standard of measurement at the same time.
Yeah.
And then people have to be taking the actions as they move forward.
Yeah.
And it might not all be perfect, and it won't, if I was sitting getting audited by my auditors, they'd be saying, well, you don't know that for sure because it's a non-verified number.
Yeah.
But I kind of think we need to live with that ambiguity.
How important has Mark Carney been in this whole process?
So, I would say he's been really important. So I think he was very important when he was the UK regulator in terms of, he asked us to do the biennial stress test, which we've just submitted.
Right.
And I think what was really good about that, and if I think of my own personal, when that came in, it was like, how on earth can I do something? I have no measurement of anything. And now you want me to submit a 30-year stress test, but I've got nothing. I thought, well, I don't have anything. I've only just started to do my modelling for these targets off the 2019. Right. But actually, we did submit it. And then if I look at the quality of conversation we were having internally by the time we submitted it, it had moved on massively, and he was really pushing that piece. So I think now the role that he's gone on to, and chairing up GFANs, and then tomorrow COP's going to be an important day for that for them as well. It's been really great that he's been out there kind of just pushing because actually we went from how on earth will I do this to submitting something that we could understand that, right, this isn't great, that's not great, but this is important, that's important, and you can actually have really important conversations about it. So I think being willing to put the PRA out there in his old role, and then what he's doing just now, I think it is important.
Yeah, but I just wondered, going forward, I mean, basically, pretty much the key thing he's managed to achieve, apart from the things you're talking about, is getting the JP Morgans and Goldman Sachs and all the rest and inside the tent, which wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion.
No, absolutely.
Up to quite recently. So that is a massive win. But I suppose what I'm this kind of relates to the wider themes of COP. As you mentioned, it's important that the governments, pull their weight and kind of make some kind of progress on whatever they're going to do over in the blue zone. But what if they don't? And if they don't, if people look on COP and it's like, oh, that's a bit of a disappointment, the government's really didn't do much, then what, isn't there a risk that from the kind of private sector point of view, these kind of slightly refusenick people who had to be dragged into the tent go, well, the governments aren't doing much, so why should I have to have a kind of fully costed thing by 2025, even though that's not particularly amazing? Why don't I do it in 2027 or something? How do we stop that? I guess
I'm one of life's big optimists in terms of this, and that people will do good because it's the right thing to do. And I think, I think one of the big things that kind of hit me yesterday in one of the speeches was, it's not children of the future that are going to have the problem, it's the children that we can see today. It's my child, it's your child, sort of thing. They're the ones that are going to live with this. Yeah. Those are the same.
Thanks so much for spending the time, and enjoy the rest of the COP.
And you, have a good week.